Intro: some people spend their nights stocking shelves, monitoring screens, or walking empty hallways. And most nights, nothing happens. But some nights are different. These are 3 stories from people who worked the night shift and came back with something they couldn't explain. Story 1. Unit 114. I worked night security at a self-storage facility in Tucson, Arizona for about 14 months. It wasn't a bad gig. The pay was just enough to cover rent on a 1-bedroom apartment, and the hours, 9 at night to 5 in the morning, suited me fine because I've never been able to sleep when it's dark anyway. Something about daylight makes me feel like the world is accounted for. Nights never felt that way, but I needed the work, so I took the job. The facility was one of those older ones, built probably in the late 80s. 2 stories, exterior hallways open to the air, ground for 100 individual units. My job was to do a patrol every 2 hours, check the gate logs, watch the cameras, and call the police if anything looked off. Most nights I sat in the small guard booth near the front entrance and listened to podcasts or read. The booth had a wall of monitor showing feeds from 12 different cameras. I got to know every angle of that place the way you learn the layout of an apartment you've lived in 4 years. Without thinking about it, without trying. The storage facility had a smell to it that I still associate with that period of my life. Metal and concrete and something faintly damp, even though the building was in the desert. Old cardboard and whatever people stored in units that hadn't been opened in years on hot nights. The smell was stronger. By 2 or 3 in the morning, when the air started to cool, it would settle into something almost neutral, almost like nothing. The first thing I noticed was a unit on the 2nd floor, east corridor, all the way at the end. Unit 114. Nobody had rented it in the 4 months I'd been working there. I'd checked the log once out of boredom and it showed inactive. But when I did my 2 a.m. patrol one night in early October, I noticed the padlock was different. The unit had always had an orange disc lock from the previous tenant that management left on it as a placeholder. This padlock was silver, standard combo lock, the kind you'd buy at a hardware store for $8. I noted it in my log, figured management had rented the unit and hadn't updated me, and kept walking. The next week, on a Thursday, I checked the rental log during a slow hour. Unit 114 still showed inactive. I mentioned it to my supervisor when he came in for the morning handoff. He said he'd look into it. He never brought it up again, and I didn't push it. What I started paying attention to after that was the camera feed for the east corridor. The angle covered the full length of the hallway, though at the far end, where 114 was, the image quality dropped off. Things that far from the lens looked soft and dark, especially when the hallway lights dimmed, which they did between 10 and 4 a.m. On some kind of automatic cycle I'd never fully understood. I'd raised it as a maintenance issue twice and nothing happened. On a night in mid-October, I was watching the monitors around 3 in the morning and I saw something on the east corridor feed. Movement near the end of the hall. I leaned toward the screen. The image was grainy at that distance, but I could see that the area in front of Unit 114 was different than it usually was. There was a shadow on the wall that didn't match anything I could account for from the fixed overhead light. It wasn't moving. It was just there, against the wall, with a shape that wasn't the door, wasn't the lock, wasn't any part of the architecture I knew. I went up to check. I took my flashlight and I walked the east corridor, and by the time I got to the end, the hallway was empty. The lock was there, the door was shut, the shadow was gone, or rather, the light had normalized and everything looked the way it always did. I stood at the end of the hall for a minute, listening. The facility was quiet the way large empty spaces are quiet, with undertones, low hums from the hood, the faint white noise of air moving through concrete. I went back to the booth. What I keep going back to is the night in early November when I found the door unlocked. Not the padlock removed. The padlock was still there, closed, hanging in the hasp. but the roll-up door of the unit itself was unsealed at the bottom. When I crouched down and pressed on it, it gave. About 6 inches of space between the door and the ground. Enough to pass things through. Enough to pass thin things through. I called my supervisor before I opened it. He didn't answer. I called the non-emergency police line because I didn't know what else to do, and the dispatcher told me an officer would come by to assist. I waited outside Unit 114 for 22 minutes. When the officer arrived and we lifted the door together, the unit was empty. Completely bare concrete floor, empty walls. In an empty storage unit that nobody had rented in at least for months. The unit was empty when we opened it. The building's perimeter showed nothing unusual on any camera feed for the 22 minutes I waited. I finished out my shifts until the end of November, then put in my notice. The job listing stayed up online for a long time after I left. As far as I know, Unit 114 is still there.